Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Rabbi Cohen and I returned from Israel yesterday morning, and it was my first trip to Israel since the hostages have been released, the living hostages. I shared with you, I think on the holidays and at other times, that when we were there this summer in Israel, and I have been at least 8-10 times since October 7th, that there was a very mournful and somber feeling throughout the land. This was a different feeling. It wasn't euphoric, but it was a feeling of relief. The country was breathing again. It got its rhythms back. It was standing on its own 2 feet, even if it were shaky. We were part of a mission sponsored by Israel Bonds, and one of the very first stops we made on the mission was to a place called Hostage Square. The route of Hostage Square started on October the 13th, 2023, when a lone man was sitting on a plastic chair outside of the art museum in Tel Aviv. And in those days, people were not out in the street. It was still 6 days after the terror and the atrocity, and he was just sitting on a chair by himself. Someone came up to the man and said, "What are you doing here? Why are you just sitting here?" He said, "My wife has been killed. My children have been taken hostage. I have nowhere else to go." So the person who asked decided to grab a chair and sit with him. And within a few hours and then days, a grass movement came to be, and literally thousands upon thousands of people convened at this outdoor space outside of the art museum. And then installations of art grew in that area, and they changed almost daily. Now, I had been many times while there were hostages and none yet released, and I have been at times where there were hostages and some were released, and there were installations for different hostages waiting for them to come home. There was a bench waiting for Evyatar David, and it said, "We're waiting to sit next to you on this bench." There was a piano that said, "You are not alone," that was waiting for Emanu-El because he was a pianist. There were other installations in memory at the time and hope for the Bibas family. And there were groups of people from different kibbutzim who came and told their stories in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. So going to Hostage Square this time, after the 20 living hostages were now released, and at the time that I was there were only 8 dead hostages that we were waiting for their return, and now there are just 5. I was expecting to see something a little different. I thought maybe they would be dismantling Hostage Square. I thought maybe most of the installations would be gone. But it wasn't. It was exactly the same as the last time I was there in August and the times before that, in May and in March and in January, and dating all the way back to November of 2023. It was identical. The only thing that was different is there was much less traffic. Far fewer people were gathering there. But it was exactly the same. And it got me scratching my head, asking the question, why? Why is this still up? Emanu-El, who was held captive for over 730 days, who played the piano on the equivalent of the show in Israel of Saturday Night Live called Eretz Nehederet. And it was this well-received, well-seen moment. He's been back with his family. Why is there still a piano up paying homage to the release of Emanu-El? What's that about? Why is there still a bench that says, "We will wait to sit next to you with Evyatar David"? Why is it that we are reluctant to take down Hostage Square? Now, I want to be abundantly clear. I have long and will always advocate for the release of every body that is being held in Gaza. And each family member deserves to have a place to visit their loved one, to mourn them, and they should be interred in the land of Israel or the place of their choice if they're a foreign worker. And we should not stop until each and every one of them are brought home. Unequivocal in that. But that's different than what Hostage Square represented. And I was wildly flummoxed by this. One of my good friends who came here for Shabbat in the spring of last year, Nisimi Naim Naor, invited Elias and me for Shabbat dinner. It was actually Shabbat lunch, not that that's relevant. And we're having Shabbat lunch with him and his family, and he had some other guests there. And there was an Israeli family who had made Aliyah. She was from England, and he was from Maryland. Lovely couple, Jeremy and Claire. And Jeremy is one of the people who wears the date, the number of days on his lapel of whatever he's wearing that the hostages have been held. And I believe he was wearing 731, 734, whatever the number was, he had it on. And we had a really good time talking over lunch. And I said, I want to ask you a question as if I knew you for a long time. And I also want to be abundantly clear, Jeremy. I make no judgments. I'm just curious, which I am. You're still wearing that sticker with the dates. And I see a lot of people still wearing the yellow ribbons. Why? He looked at his wife, and his wife looked at him, and they had a little laugh as if it were an inside joke. And he said, I'm wearing this until all of the hostages, both living and dead, come home. I said, that's a fair reason, and I accept that, and it makes sense to me. But then his wife said, well, let me chime in. Every day at the end of the day, he takes the sticker off, and he puts it on a piece of paper, and it's by our front door. And we have 700 pieces, stacked like this. And I wanted to throw it out, and he wouldn't let me. And it was a major source of contention in our family. Why is it that she wanted to throw it out, and he won't let her? I don't think it's limited to the last 5 bodies that are waiting to come home. I think it has something to do intrinsically with how it is that we identify with this moment. What was perhaps most perplexing for me at Hostage Square was not that the installations were still up, was not that this area had looked identical to the way it did the day that the 20 were released and for months before that. But in Hostage Square, they had the equivalent of gift shops. Now, all of the proceeds from the things sold go to the families of the bereaved, for those families of the hostage, for those who were affected. None of it is going for some major profit. But there were 2 gift shops now. 2 outdoor areas where you could buy t-shirts, you could buy hats, you could continue to buy yellow ribbons. And now they even had double yellow ribbons, one for the living and one for the dead. And they had more bumper stickers and more identifiers. And the other interesting thing I noticed over the course of the week was that people who had yellow ribbons tied to their cars or to their antenna on their cars or their door handles, or people who walked around with them, they still had them on. Rabbi Cohen and I took a visit to I-24 News, behind the scenes of the Israeli news station that's supposed to give Al Jazeera a run for its money. And almost to the person, every single one of the anchors that we got to meet, and we met 7 or 8 of them, all continued to wear yellow ribbons. And it got me thinking to that moment that we decided how we were going to acknowledge the release of the 20 hostages here at the temple. And I got an idea from my colleague, Rabbi Felipe Goodman. He told everyone to come to shul with their dog tags that they've been wearing for the last 2 years, or their yellow ribbons, and that they would affix it to one of the Torah scrolls. And we did the same thing here. We took the Torah scroll, that's one of our Holocaust Torahs, it's white with the yellow Jewish star on it, and we asked everyone on Simchat Torah to come with those ribbons and those dog tags and to place them on. And I noticed something really interesting from a psychological point of view. A lot of people had them, but they were reluctant to take them off. They were reluctant to take it off and to put it on the Torah and to ritualize that moment. And I had been flummoxed by this moment for the last week. scratching my head, why is it that we can't let go of this moment? And then I was reminded about an event that happened, I think 14 years ago, 2011. In June of 2011, with very little warning, my father died. And I did a process for the second time, but it was even more potent for me, that I said Kaddish for my father every single day. No matter what I did, no matter where I went, I was going to say Kaddish for him. It actually dictated all of my travels, everywhere I scheduled my day for. I felt that was the least I could do to honor his memory. And then we were coming to the end of Kaddish, that 11-month period. And I was getting nervous. I didn't want to stop saying Kaddish. So I ended up looking up a piece of responsa written by our very own Adi Rabinowitz's father, Mayor Rabinowitz, who wrote in this responsa for the conservative movement that indeed, if you want to memorialize a parent, you can and you actually should say Kaddish for 12 months, not 11. And it was as if I got this extra breath of oxygen. I felt so relieved. I got another month to say Kaddish for my dad. And I did. I followed that responsa that I read. And then there was 2 weeks left and 1 week left, and I was still nervous. It didn't help that I got to push off time. And then the day came to an end. I said Kaddish for the last time at Mincha. And the next day, Kaddish came around, and I sat down. And I felt empty. I felt lost. And I didn't know why for a long time. And then I realized it with some maturation and some processing. You see, my identity forever changed. I was always the son of Sherman Philip Kirshner, the rabbi and the cantor and the PhD. He was always my dad. But I was pained, and I was hurt, and I was sad by his loss. So that when I was saying Kaddish, it was an outward sign to the world with my beard and with the lack or non-attendance of weddings and parties and all of the things that are festive, that this is part of my identity. I'm a wounded man mourning the loss of my father. And you all are going to know that by the actions that I'm a part of and the prayers that I'm saying. So how does it happen that a day passes on the calendar and I no longer am that person? I'm still in the same pain. I'm still just as wounded. I'm still grieving the same. How do I let the world know that this is who I am? If I can't say Kaddish anymore, and I'm no longer exempt from going to weddings and parties, and I'm supposed to shave my beard tight now, how are you all going to know that I feel different, that I'm still hurt, that I'm still wounded? I think that's exactly what's going on for the state of Israel on a different scale. I think there's a reluctance to give up the figurative yellow pin, to put up our dog tags, to take down Hostage Square and go back to business as usual, because I think what happened on October 7th is an indelible scar on the soul of the Zionist people. Not just the Israeli people, the Zionist people. And I think we're really scared to take down those public signs for people to think that we are the same, because we are not the same in a post-October 7th world. I think the events of October 7th will have a much larger and more striking impact than the War of Independence, than the Six-Day War, than the Yom Kippur War, than Lebanon, and many other events. Perhaps differently on micro examples, but on the macro, I'm convinced of it. And what people, I believe, are afraid of is if we take down the ribbon and we take down those ties that are on our antenna in our cars and the signs that are on our door, and we go back to making the art museum just a pavilion, that the world will think, and God forbid, we will think, we're exactly the same as we were on October 6th. even though we know we're not. And that is the metach, that is the tension that exists right now between the inertia, the impetus, the drive to continue to move forward, and that anchoring that we hold on so tightly for, of not letting go to our past. In Israel, better than most countries, we are great at memorializing. We were in Israel for the 30th commemoration of the assassination of Rabbi. It only took minutes for that space to be demarcated into what would continue to be a living and lasting memorial to the slain prime minister. When I got to the Nova Festival site, I was amazed how much it had changed just since August. Because at the Nova Festival site, there now is a paved parking lot, a visitor center. It is prepared to greet thousands upon thousands of people every day. Because when it comes to memory, we do that fantastically. But when it comes to moving forward, we do that reluctantly. And I appreciate why we do it reluctantly, because we are afraid of letting go of our past so that people will think that it doesn't affect who we are today. There is a middle-aged, overweight rabbi who lives and works in Bergen County, New Jersey, who wrote about 14 years ago an article for the paper encouraging all Jews who are passionate Zionists to jettison the holiday of Tisha B'Av. That the whole notion of the holiday of Tisha B'Av was to commemorate the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and that we say in our prayers, both in our liturgy and on the actual 9th day of Av, let us rebuild Jerusalem. Let us rebuild the temple. And one Tisha B'Av, I'm sitting at the western wall. I look to my right and to my left, and I see throngs. I'm talking thousands of people of all stripes and backgrounds, men and women, religious and secular. And they're praying at the Kotel. There are army people protecting us of all different backgrounds and stripes. There are cars and buildings and cranes growing this incredible city that is all about multiculturalism, that is all about possibility, that is all about the dreams of our ancestors. And I thought it was blind and actually a slap in the face to our liturgy to continue to commemorate the 9th of Av in what is a rebuilt Jerusalem. And when I wrote this article and put it out in the paper, most of the observant world treated it as if I had suggested to put a giant cross up in every synagogue in North America. It felt blasphemous to them. It felt wrong. It felt like it was against everything that was core to our DNA. And what I think they were most afraid of was erasing a piece of our history that created our very DNA today. And what might that lead to? My theology is a different theology because I feel like I'm in a dynamic relationship with our history, with our liturgy, with our future. And others, they feel that we have to be reminded of that piece, that memory. And holding on to that memory is core to our existence, so much so that taking it away is tantamount to taking away our oxygen, our lifeline, the heart that beats through the Jewish people. Jonathan Safran Foer was once asked, what's the difference between Jews and other people? You speak about and write about Jews so often. And he said, any other person that was pricked on the finger and blood came out, they would ask which one of the 5 senses did it invoke the most? A feeling, of touch, of smell, of taste. Did you hear the pinprick? But a Jew is different. A Jew, Jonathan Safran Foer says, how did you remember the moment? That is our 6th sense. In the parsha that we read today, in the almost sacrifice of Isaac, We know that that event forever changed the Jewish people, forever changed Abraham and his relationship with his son, and forever changed Isaac and his relationship with those around him. Isaac's a scarred person. He almost died at the hands of his father. But don't you ever wonder what would happen if that moment didn't have that same effect, or it had the effect, but he was able to compartmentalize it and move forward? Would he have done an injustice to the Akedah? Would it have made that moment of the almost sacrifice less potent, less focused on, less valuable? That's the tension that we're living in today. There's no statute of limitations on memory, and there's no exact timetable of when it is that we can take off our ribbons and end this process. And I, just like Michal, who led us in our tefillah today for not only the state of Israel, but also for the return of all of those bodies so that the Israeli people can mourn. I predict that if they all came back, please God, today, as they should, that Hostage Square will stay Hostage Square for a while. Because I'm not sure how ready we are to give up that part of our identity. And I actually think that that is where so many of our challenges live. And I'm not making the recommendation that we should dismantle Hostage Square. I'm not making the suggestion that we get rid of the notion of memory and its importance in the Jewish life. But I am encouraging us all to wrestle with that tension a little better than what we have done. To think about ways that we incorporate memory in our journey forward and not just an anchoring of our past. Because I think that is where our challenge will live and what might inhibit us for our next possibility. I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.